256 blocks, the maximum build height of the world's most popular survival block game, Minecraft. The grandiose scale of these infinitely wide areas sets the stage for marvelous builds and fantastical structures, but a limit is a limit. And it does beg the question over here on this Hytale loving channel, what's possible if we push that limit? Do we even need to? How high, how deep will Hytale worlds be? What is the Hytale height limit? Welcome back to Kweebec Corner. My name is Connor, and today on Hytale Theory Talk, we take a turn away from the lore and story related elements of what we've been discussing in the series so far, and instead bust out the calculators as we try to make use of existing evidence to predict how high you'll really be able to build in Hytale. This video is sponsored by BenQ Screenbar. As a games designer and video creator, I often spend most of my day staring at the screen. Eye fatigue, blurring, and even headaches are some of the common symptoms when light levels aren't optimal. However, BenQ Screenbar is a lamp that is designed specifically with people like us in mind. The auto-dimming function ensures eye care and sufficient illumination of your workspace with non-flicker and no blue light hazard. It will also prevent screen glare and offers adjustable brightness and 8 color temperature levels. I've been using this product for over a month now to help deal with constantly working inside and on my computer. I also wanted to really get a good idea of the product before I started advertising it. At first I was worried about whether it would fit my monitor, but the bar's patented clip design adjusted perfectly. The effect on my eyes is also very noticeable, and I have far less headaches at night now. The auto adjust feature becomes part of my routine, and the angle of the bar allows for not just optimal screen lighting, but also desk lighting too. So make sure to check that out. Back to the video. Now, before we dig through all of the evidence, let's start with the precedent that's been set by previous building and block games. We'll start with Minecraft because, well, it's the most popular block game by far. In Minecraft, the original height limit was 127, but was increased to 256 in the 1.2.1 12W07A snapshot due to player demand and improved optimization on the game's front. Now, 256 may not sound like a lot to you, but consider the height of the Minecraft world, not just from the clouds to the ground, but all the way down to bedrock. Think back to all the times you were digging or mining, block after block. It's actually much larger than you think. Even with the initial 127 block height limit the game began with, amazing creations were still being built. After Notch tweeted out before the big adventure update showing his experimentation with height limit and displaying terrain generation up to 512 blocks, with some really intense high-rising mountains might I add, the game underwent a makeover, with the prior region file format that was limiting worlds to 127 blocks being overhauled and replaced with a new anvil file format we use today, which gives us 250 blocks to work with. It's still a lot smaller in comparison to that 512 number Notch had kicking around in his head, but essentially it doubled the scale of the game in just one update. And I guess before we get too deep into things, we should probably answer why Minecraft has a height limit in the first place. After all, there's hardly any limit with the length and width of your world, right? So what's the deal? Well, the reason for the height limit restriction is that Minecraft worlds are made up of 16 by 16 by 256 chunks. These chunks are loaded into memory and rendered as a player explores the world. A 3D map of chunks where the world is infinite in all directions as opposed to just the two is a whole lot more complex than the current world of chunks we manage, and optimizing for smooth gameplay would be a real challenge here. Essentially, the taller you make a chunk, the more memory it will take up when the player loads it in. Although it is theoretically possible for a mod to increase the height limit of the map, such as with cubic chunks, that would open up a whole new can of worms, a bunch of new development problems that the team would have to spend lots of time working around and fixing. And there are also very few of these types of mods that work with the current version of Minecraft or actively update today. As a matter of fact, 256 is also the highest value which can be stored in a single unsigned byte. The previous file format was limited to 128 because it used a scale which allowed for negative numbers. Doubling it to 256 conveniently gets a number that's a power of 2, making it align nicely in memory and probably helps make general chunk coding a lot simpler. Note that there is also a separate build height on servers. In the server properties file, there is a property max build height which defaults to 256. Server admins can lower this value to prevent players placing blocks above a certain height, but it won't prevent terrain from generating above this level or players climbing naturally on structures above this height either. So, long story short, if they were to make worlds vertically infinite or even expand on them to something like 1024 blocks, that would still require a lot of work and rewriting, something I personally believe is just not worth it for Mojang. Look at the Minecraft worlds we currently have after all. In Java, the default max height for mountains to generate is at around 150 blocks, even lower at 127 on Bedrock. To this extent, the game isn't even using its current height limit to full efficiency. While it's true having mountain peaks go right to the build limit would be dumb because because then you wouldn't be able to build on the mountain. Having almost 100 blocks with no terrain whatsoever just feels like a waste. It feels like adding more to that height won't achieve much. If the height was raised to 512 or above, would these extra blocks ever even be used? Unless you're a large-scale builder, what would even be the point? Many Minecraft clones or other block games, and as I've mentioned mods, have made progress on reworking the world to allow for much higher limits, in the tens of thousands in some cases, but this can heavily affect performance quality, and low memory systems are going to have a big issue when it comes to rendering at high distances. While yes, a lot of block games don't provide the building functionality, they still retain that cube element and aesthetic, and often have quite prominent factors that point to their height limitations within the world, most obviously terrain. Terrain is literally made up of hundreds of blocks in many of these games, and the height of their tallest mountains are where developers are really going to want to show off the capabilities of their engine and world in terms of height, so perhaps that's a good place to start with Hytale. While we can assume there is more than enough room for building on these mountains, let's take their peaks as the rough indications of the terrain generation limit, at least for the zones and biomes we've glimpsed at so far. In order to break down and figure out the Hytale height limit, we have to look at the sides of mountains and figure out where individual blocks meet. For the sake of my own sanity when counting blocks, I've left room for error. I have no interest in predicting the exact build height, as it will most likely fall into an easily segmentable number, something similar to 256, like 512 or 1024. The majority of tall landmasses we see in Hytale average about 100 to 150-ish blocks from the images we've seen. Although the mountain from the trailer looks very tall, some even predicting it to be like 500 blocks, it sits at roughly 120 to 140-ish. Same goes for the Zone 2 canyons and any other mountain set pieces we've seen. 70 blocks, 105, 120, some cases even being 150-ish. And when you see all of my red lines on these images, you will notice that it's mostly counting down from the peak to the ground or sea level. Because we haven't really seen a big drop and a big height all in one image, we're going to need to piece together the above sea level height and below sea level height separately, and then combine them together to find the overworld max height. We do see some really big mountains in Zone 3 and 4 gameplay, probably alluding to what I believe will be a truly mountainous zone risen above the rest of the world for Zone 5's lightning element. These big boys stretch to upwards of 150 to the late 200s of blocks, already dwarfing the current expectation of 256 for the entire world height. If there's mountains this big and we've still not even gone underground, then we're definitely tilting towards that 512 block limit. Of course, a lot of the stuff we've seen may have just been tests, various set pieces to make us feel in the mood. It's important to remember that everything is still in development, but if we can continue to connect some of the dots, it could just help us set our expectations. The sea level is fairly apparent in Hytale. We see a lot of coasts and have had extensive underwater shots. Taking a few block measurements from these images and doing some counting plus estimation, we see the sea floor appearing at about 30 to 60ish blocks down. However, we also know that there will be a deep ocean biome, so this will most likely take us even further, giving us a fully explorable underwater world. If we're able to assume that 200 block tall mountains above sea level can exist with a sea floor almost 60 blocks deep, then 256 is almost definitely out of the question at this point. In fact, Hytale verified this way back in 2018 on a Facebook comment, claiming that the height limit will in fact surpass that of Minecraft. Last but not least, we have surface level going all the way down to the bottom layer of the world. We haven't actually seen what the bottom layer of the world looks like yet, but from all of the mid sections of the caves, we can probably start to guess on the height. In this video, the player takes about 20 steps down in terms of blocks, with the cave then expanding a further 10 or so. We've also seen footage of a dude just jumping down a huge hole, setting a really good expectation of depth, or at least for surface level caverns. In this video, we see not just a roughly 50 block tall mountain in the background, but the player must drop at least 30 blocks themselves before venturing down another 10. In Zone 4, we've also seen cavernous underworlds, like with the home of the Slothians. It's hard to really measure the size of this place, but we're roughly looking at about a 60 to 70ish block thick layer for this type of biome, and that's just one of the few that they have planned for the underground of Zone 4. I think we can say with confidence that the underground depth will probably supersede 100 blocks at some point, if they're really trying to capture that dungeoneering and adventurous mining element. And so if we're looking at higher than 200 blocks above the surface and more than 100 blocks below, we can only assume the closest limit to that would be 512. Like I said earlier, that number would fit nicely. If my counting was a little off and some of those mountains are closer to 300 or 400 blocks and we've still got over 100 blocks below, it may even be a case of a 1024 block height limit, but that would be crazy performance intensive. Minecraft has optimization problems as it is, and it barely even fills the air with anything. With mountains taking up large masses of the chunk, it could present some real problems if the team stepped over 512. However, let's give them some credit where it's due. They may have very easily found a solution to this, similar to the developer of the Cubic Chunks mod, as well as any other block games that managed to reach the limit. So what have we learnt today? Well, we know for a fact that the Hytale block height will be above 256, and we know that you'll be able to go further down than in most block games too. My best guess from all of this evidence is that the block limit we're going to get for Hytale will be 512, maybe 1024 at a push, but I doubt it. What do you guys think? Maybe something in between? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Half of the fun with these theory talks is hearing what you all have to say and discussing it. Remember, you can follow me at Kweebec Corner on Twitter for more updates, and join our Discord with the link below if you want to chat with over 2,000 Hytale enthusiasts such as yourself. Also, thank you guys so much for not just 10k, but 15,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone regardless of how big any other creators may be. It overwhelms me every time I upload to see your response. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and thanks as always for watching Kweebec Corner. Stay safe and keep free.